David.
Hi, I'm David.
I'm Patrick.
David R. Gillie, Patrick Belmont. We met a couple of years ago. Was it almost 2 years ago?
Right about 2 years ago.
Because we were both running for public office. I was running for county clerk, and Patrick was running for the 3rd House District, which is in this valley. And League of Women Voters sponsored a Meet the Candidates night at First Presbyterian of Logan. And so we were there. It was pitifully attended, right?
It was not well attended, even by some of the candidates.
Yeah, I mean, there were only a handful of candidates for public office who even bothered to show, and there probably were 10 candidates running for various offices. Or am I remembering that wrong?
Well, at least, yeah.
But
League of Women Voters had just brought a lawsuit against the legislature, and so
give that context, because that's an important context.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters had just brought a lawsuit against the legislature for the gerrymandered voting districts,
which very much affected Patrick, because his district is very much a gerrymander.
Yeah, indeed. It's most of Logan, but they've carved out some strange parts of Logan for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And then they cut River Heights right in half, so it's just half of that community gets represented within my district, and then it goes 13 miles up the range front,
kind of north. Yeah,
up and loops in Richmond and Cove, and doesn't include a single house between there. And so I've done a half marathon exactly, from the last house in Logan to the first house in Richmond,
which I think is a wonderful campaign tactic or something, way to bring publicity to the issue, and
a little attention.
And, it's interesting. Gerrymandering comes from the name of Elbridge Gerry, one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. But he was Speaker of the House in Massachusetts in what years? I don't know, late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. I don't remember, but after independence, and we were already at that time sort of coalescing into two distinct parties, more to our detriment than to our benefit. And so, the legislature kind of did the districts in Massachusetts in such a way as to confer perceived partisan advantage, and some political cartoonist drew what looked like a salamander vaguely of the shape of those, and he called it a gerrymander. And here we are still to this day with this this is only one problem, but it is a problem of, in my opinion, our putting too much emphasis on parties.
Indeed.
Wouldn't you agree?
Indeed.
Yeah. So we met there, and you spoke to that, and I did not, in the course of my the few questions they gave me, with usually 2 minutes each, which I think is wholly inadequate to really do anything responsible for many questions. Yeah. But that didn't come up in the questions they put to me, and it doesn't apply in nearly the same way. There's no districting of a county for county clerk purposes, but nevertheless, parties are very important to the duties of a clerk who sees his duties seriously. But anyway, we started talking then, I think, and that sort of, at least for me, I don't know about you, for me it wanted to make me get to know you better. Because you were obviously someone who thought a lot about that, and it's something that I've thought a lot about all my adult life. And so I thought, I need to get to know him. And so I think I reached out to you, and we started getting to know each other a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, indeed. And I agree. It didn't affect your race directly, because you were representing the whole
But it would have
county.
affected my duties.
And it does affect us all in a variety of ways. I mean, this country was founded on democracy being a competition of ideas. That's what it has to be. It's lots of people come with different ideas, and we talk about those.
But ideas, not clubs, or not. Right.
And not just identities. We've kind of shifted from a competition of ideas to now it's just become a battle of identities. And
yes. And don't you believe to a cancerous level?
To a cancerous level.
To beyond, literally, it threatens the death of the republic, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it has in the past. There are flaws of human nature and weaknesses of human nature and some virtues of human nature. Was it Madison who said human nature is made necessary by fallen human nature, but there's just enough virtue that it's possible that self-government is possible. I'm bastardizing, but you know what I'm talking about, Madison's quote. We have the capacity for civic virtue, or virtue of any kind, but we sure have a lot of the other, and the other is always being with us. And I believe we in our country are blessed in many, many important ways in our constitutional order, vis-a-vis any other people in written history. The advantages of our constitutional order as founded on the truths of the Declaration and our specific Constitution of the United States and our specific Constitution of Utah or of Colorado or whatever, we're blessed in many ways in which our civic order is vastly superior to anything we've read about in written history. And I believe one of the important ways is that in our state and in our state constitutions and in our Constitution of the United States, parties simply have no role. They're not even acknowledged to exist. Whereas in most parliamentary governments, the existence of the party is integral to the whole conception. Parties run, and in some countries, the party wins, and then the party bosses choose, okay, Patrick, you get to fill the ministry of this, and okay, Donna, you get to be this, and they're handed out. And to my view, that is vastly inferior and plays to a much greater extent to the weaknesses of human nature than do our own constitutions that at least don't even acknowledge the existence of parties and allow us to talk about ideas and allow us to unite on the rightness or wrongness or fitness or unfitness of ideas, at least potentially. But what's the reality? The reality to me, tragically, is that from the very beginning of the Republic, parties have very often played a huge role both in national politics and in state politics and in local politics that's not merited, that is not deserved, and that is very often really detrimental. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love to teach American civics, and to me, one of the greatest illustrations of this potential cancer is that in 1798, the crisis of 1798, Britain and France and their allies were engaged in a world war. And so each of the behemoths, France and Britain, wanted to weaken its opponent and strengthen itself by preying on shipping. And that included American shipping. We were huge shippers then. Much of the world shipping today is not carried in American bottoms as it ought to be, you would think. But even then, a huge proportion of the world shipping was carried in American bottoms, neutral ships that no one had a right to molest on the high seas because we weren't at war with either Britain or France or any of the combatants. And yet both Britain and France attacked, captured our ships, and in Britain's case, impressed our sailors, and Americans found themselves sort of turning against each other carelessly in their argument over does Great Britain pose the most mortal threat to our survival or does France? And they coalesced into Federalists who considered that France was the greatest threat, and Republicans who considered that Great Britain was the greatest threat. And you had so much as John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, two of the greatest Americans who ever lived, the yin and the yang of American independence, the president and the vice president of the United States. Did I say Jefferson first or John Adams? Anyway, President Adams and Vice President Jefferson at each other's, maybe not at each other's throats, but in violent disagreement, and people in the country lining up behind them as Federalists or Republicans, and newspaper reporters and editors lining up accordingly. And there became so much bitterness that when Jefferson won the election of 1800, President Adams, and I greatly admire Adams and all the Adams men for 4 generations, but I must say this was a great error on his part. And I'm sure he would acknowledge this today. He did not remain in Washington to watch Jefferson take the oath and to shake his hand and to wish him well, but instead bitterly left. That was a great error, and that was partisan politics poisoning us. Jefferson, to his credit, did much to heal that in his inaugural address. I wish I could quote it, but you know what I'm talking about? Where he says, basically, we all have the same principles. We all have the same Declaration. We all have the same Constitution. We are all Federalists. We are all Republicans. But that almost killed it then, and wouldn't you say it's almost killed us several times since?
It has. I think what you bring up is, it's when our egos get in the way. When it becomes about our egos.
And our identities.
That's right.
But also real issues. I mean, we're life and death issues, disagreement, but we allow our egos to take predominance, don't we?
And those...
And our clubbiness, or our usness versus themness.
That's right.
I don't know how to say that, but know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The disagreement should be a way that we are continually improving. If we're really doing it right, if we're coming into conversations with curiosity and deeply trying to understand the arguments other people are making.
Or trying to understand the arguments and maybe be persuaded by them.
Yeah.
No, maybe not,
but feature.
We have to have something open in our mind that I'm at least open to hear and respect your arguments.
Exactly.
And to respect you as a fellow American who has a brain and a heart for his country too.
That's right. Absolutely.
We have to give each other at least that, don't we?
We do. That lies at the foundation of us doing great things together. That's at the foundation.
I think you're so right.
And I think you hit on something there a little bit earlier. We are imperfect people.
Oh yeah.
No matter how hard we try. And for those of us who forget that, it becomes very much about the ego.
Yes.
It really requires us to be.
I'm the good guy and you're the bad guy, right?
Yeah, that's right. The heroes and villains narrative, and it's just not healthy.
To the extent there's some truth in that, there's also a lot of untruth in that, or at least there's a lot of fault and a lot of blindness and weakness on all sides. Is there not?
That's right. And I think we only really move in a better direction when we are taking the time to reflect on who we are, on what we're trying to do here. And that's become increasingly difficult, in this
Would you
world.
say in the last 5 years or in our lifetime or both?
It's been increasing throughout history because technology accelerates us. It accelerates the pace of life. It creates lots of busyness in our lives. And with all of that busyness, it crowds out a lot of things that really bring meaning in our lives. That's the way that I see it.
I think that's really true in my life. I think that's really true.
Yeah, and I've seen that kind of increasingly throughout my life, and it's really been some of these times that I've had to step back from my job for a little bit, to step back from a campaign. I've lost 2 campaigns now. Those are both learning moments for me where I had to step back and say, what did I do right there? What could I have done better? Where was I really representing everything?
Now, these are your 2 recent campaigns for the 3rd House District.
That's right. Yeah.
And both of those you ran unaffiliated.
Yeah, in 2022 I ran as a Democrat.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
And then in 2024
is when we met.
That's right.
Tell me about the considerations. I mean, you probably had some pros and cons that led to each of those decisions. Is that right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, some people look at a party as a lifelong vow. They are a member of a party, and that's what they're going to be.
So many of us do. Yeah. I think that's a great flaw.
Yeah,
great flaw.
Indeed.
But so many of us do. I think of my father-in-law by my deceased wife. So many conversations we would have, and he always voted the Republican ticket.
Right.
And I would try to talk at a higher or a deeper level, depending how you want to, use the metaphor. And he would say, well, if those damn Democrats had,
That's it.
And I'm sure there were millions of conversations in American homes where it was similar, but if those damn Republicans You know, and the issues may have been a little different, or they may have been the same.
Yeah.
When then President George Bush II began in a serious way in the wake of Hurricane Katrina to introduce police state elements that had never seen any appearance in our country since World War II, when he had interned thousands of Americans because they had Japanese names. But generally, that's not something that had been in our country. We discussed the seriousness of this with my father-in-law, and he would always say, "If those damn Democrats." So our usness can blind us to the most basic things of right and wrong. You know,
exactly.
And I can imagine reciprocal problems in Democrat households that would say, "Well, if those damn Republicans," you know.
And it has become so extreme. It has become so extreme. I mean, it was less extreme.
And we don't even
in
see our
2022
blindness.
than it
We
was.
don't even see our blindness.
We don't see it.
Very
Absolutely.
Very often.
Absolutely.
We believe it. And I'm sure, you know, I'm very sure that Hamilton thought and clearly saw, yes, we Federalists are the white horse, and those Republicans, they're secretly in love with the French Revolution, and they're going to lead our path down our country down the path of democratic revolution and blood and horror and guillotines, and I'm sure at times he and the Federalist press really believed what they were saying, and that the Republicans, for their part, truly believed that Hamilton, at least, is secretly wishing that we were back in the British Empire. You know, they've said these kinds of things in the press, and at times they probably believed it because they got carried away with their own usness and themness.
That's right.
Their own identity, as you say. Well, I'm a Federalist, I'm a Republican, and I've certainly seen that all my life. And families that say, well, and my father was and my grandfather was you know?
Well,
so it's a family identity thing when it should be, well, what is my civic duty under our state's constitution, under our United States Constitution? What duties do I owe to my fellow citizens? What do we owe to each other? And what does Patrick offer versus, say, what does Jason offer, or whatever the case may be? And let's figure out what the ideas are, and or the character or other qualities that should be considered.
That's right.
In choosing a public servant, one of which I don't think is an elephant or a donkey or a Constitution Party. Our emblem is the eagle, but again, it shouldn't be. It should be something deeper.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, and you think about how the parties have changed over time. You know, historically they've had major transitions. We're seeing that now. Right?
They've completely changed positions in times. Do you remember? This is something that I've used in teaching civics. But do you remember in 57? But it may have been as late as 50.
I was really young then.
Yeah. No, but it may have been after the Lincoln-Douglas campaign, so it may have been 58 or 59. But some group in Massachusetts wrote a letter to Lincoln, so he was well known enough that these people, Henry O. Pierce and others, they wrote a letter, would you come speak at this Jefferson Day dinner? We're going to honor Thomas Jefferson, would you speak? And Lincoln couldn't do it, but he, as he always did, if you asked him anything that affects our body politic, he gave some great lessons in his reply, and he told this funny story, probably made up. He says, I once watched two drunken men in a brawl in the street, and in the course of the brawl, the one man had writhed himself out of his coat and into that of his opponent, and his opponent had done the same in reverse, so that by the end, and then he uses the metaphor to say the Republican was wearing the Federalist coat, and the New Englander's coat, and the New Englander was wearing the Republicans, and this is the truth. In fact, the reason the Republican Party as we know it today, which is not at all the same as Jefferson's Republican Party, came into existence was because the then Democratic Party, which was the heir of Jefferson's Republican Party, and the Whig Party had so convoluted themselves, and also neither one really wanted, except some people did, but a great part of both parties didn't want to touch the greatest issue of slavery that was about to sunder the republic. And so the Republicans came in and said, well, at least we will talk about the elephant in the room, and But parties, what's that mean? That in the course of a decade or a generation, it might mean a completely different coalescence of ideas.
Indeed.
Or simply identity with a label and no more content than that. Sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes
you think about fiscal responsibility, and a lot of people thought about the Republican Party in recent decades.
They thought so.
And then you look at what the debt has done.
Look at the last 20 years and say, well, do they believe that? I don't know. Are they campaigning with that?
The data suggests otherwise. But it was kind of this kind of same thing that
you were seeing that.
I was seeing that, and I've always been independent. I've been independent my whole life, but at that point, I didn't really think I could run as an independent. I mean, there's never been an independent elected to the Utah legislature.
Ever in the history?
I will be the first.
Well, that enough, my fellow citizens, and that enough ought to give each of us in Patrick's district some serious thinking.
I hope so. I hope it does kind of help people realign to what we're trying to do here. So as I was going into that decision to run the first time, Dan Johnson was in the seat at that time, and Dan was a friend of mine. I had a deep respect for him. And I still vividly remember the phone call I made. He was in a subcommittee meeting at the time, but he took my call because we were
longtime friends.
And I said, Dan, I love you, but I got to run against you because we have to have this competition of ideas. And
now, it's because you were in serious disagreement about some things, or you thought we needed a real discussion?
There were some votes that he had placed that I disagreed with, and the gerrymandering our districts was one of those votes that I really thought, geez, that wasn't the right way to go on this. We have to have a competition of ideas. We can't be creating safe seats for either party. And Republicans did it here primarily. In New York, it was the Democrats that gerrymandered.
Oh yeah, it's as old as our history.
But I called Dan. There was no way I was going to win against him. If I ran as a Republican. And so
he was still going to win.
He would have won handedly. So I thought the only way that I get to a general election is if I'm running with a party and as a Democrat. And there were certainly things with the Democratic platform that really align well with things that I believe in too. But I really, it was less about signing up for a party as it was, I need to have a legitimate place on the ballot.
Right.
When 2024 came around, I really wanted to run again. That had been one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. And the most meaningful part of it was getting around in our community.
And meeting people and talking to them.
I knocked over 6,000 doors myself. Talked to those people on their doorstep. And a lot of politicians, they'll go and they'll knock doors where they know their supporters.
Where they know the person talking with them is going to say, "You got it, baby."
That's right. That's right.
Good on you.
I went right down the street. I knocked every single door. I wanted to hear what every single person had to say. And that taught me a lot.
I'll bet.
And it was actually one of the most cathartic things I had done, because the country was feeling a bit divisive then.
This was 22?
22. It's felt so much more. Well, but you look at where we are now, and it's even more divisive, I'd say. But
so I moved here in February of 2020.
Oh yeah.
So I'm in the midst of the COVID dictatorship. Every public servant, almost across the board, is acting like a little tin pot dictator, making it up as he goes along.
Yeah.
Including our then governor, and but at the same time, I noticed a marked increase in our division amongst each other as a people, beginning that time and only increasing since.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think it's just increased since. If you'd asked me at that point, I would have said it can't get much worse than this, and yet I think we've gotten worse than that. But
am I overstating this? But I believe we have never been less united fundamentally than since 1861.
I think.
Do you think I'm overstating that?
No, I think that's absolutely true. But what I'm also seeing is a lot of people are recognizing that right now.
So we're coming to our senses? or we're coming
you
to
know,
the realization that we ought to come to our senses.
It's more
We're
that.
not that far yet, but we're coming to the realization that maybe we ought to come to our senses.
Yeah. As I'm going out and knocking doors, again, every door, I'm seeing a lot of disorientation. A lot of people are recognizing what we have been doing in the past is really not working. And there are forces that not everybody can articulate entirely, but that feel
But that are
very,
playing us that way, or
yeah, and it just feel very tense and somewhat inescapable.
yeah,
And yet people also know we can't keep going the same direction. Something else has to emerge from this. And from that is where I'm gaining the most hope right now. I'm talking with people on both ends of the political spectrum who are recognizing we are in this together. We need to
we
be
don't have
doing
any other
things
fellow
different.
citizens, right? We are the only fellow citizens we have.
That's right. We have got to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And people are not sure what that means yet, but I see people opening up to the possibility of that. And that's deeply inspiring for me. Because I don't have all the answers either.
Yeah.
And I know that.
Yeah.
What I know is that we're only going to get through it together. And that part of that means dropping the labels and just saying, we are all Americans here. We need to have real conversations. We need to be reflecting on who we are and what we're trying to do here. And recognize that we can only do it together. We can only do it together.
That's great. And I'm glad you're seeing some. I have an Eeyore streak. I'm a very positive person, but I have an Eeyore streak. Remember Eeyore? Well, the donkey in the Christopher Robin stories,
Okay, yeah.
And they're having the piglet and the Roo and everybody, and something happens, and the donkey always goes, "Oh no, my life is over." I have a strong streak in I think I'm a very positive person, but I have a strong Eeyore streak, especially when it comes to civics. I've intensely watched our civic order since I was a boy.
Yeah.
Because I'm the first citizen, and I'm emotionally deeply invested in the prospect of we could have a free, self-governing country. We did it for over 150 years, and we still have the same constitutional order if we rediscover it and repent and return to it.
That's right.
And repent to seeing each other as citizens, we might have it again.
That's right.
I'm deeply invested in that. And most of the news in my lifetime has been downhill. And so I get this Eeyore streak. So I'm glad you're giving me some sunshine.
Well, but you're right to be concerned, and I share that concern. Anyone who is really paying attention to what's going on right now is deeply concerned.
Yeah.
But what gives me hope is that it's more and more people who are starting to pay attention, and they don't know exactly what they should be doing yet.
But they're at least opening to the idea that I need to do something differently.
We can't be on autopilot here.
And I hope I need to do something differently, because it's just by human nature much easier to say, well, if the rest of my fellow citizens would stop doing X or start doing Y.
That's right.
But it's much rarer that we say, what am I doing wrong?
That's right.
Or what am I not doing that I ought to do? So I hope there's some of that. You and I serve on the same committee, the Cache Valley Independence 250 Committee, and we're doing the impossible. Or we're trying. We haven't succeeded yet. We're trying to do the impossible, and that is to encourage our fellow citizens of this valley to make this entire year a year of civic repentance. And some people, you even mentioned that, and it's so off-putting that they completely shut you down. A member of our committee shared a text with me a couple of weeks ago. It was deeply disturbing because the person in the text was committed to do something musically in one of the civic devotionals that we're sponsoring in the Tabernacle and elsewhere this year, and consciously withdrew because of something that he read in our internal communications where I had tried to assess where we are, and I should read it here, but I won't. He read something like, I can't be a part of this. It seems that you guys are doing a strange blend of religion and politics that I just can't get on board with. Well, has there been anything that you would call political in what we've done in the committee? It's all civic, isn't it? Is that
everything that I've been a part of has been civic?
I think we've done such a masterful job of hewing that line and making that distinction. Both last year, you weren't part of the committee last year when we did the public reading on the steps, public reading of the Declaration on the steps of the old county courthouse. But from the get-go, from our first meeting, one of the ground rules was no politics, which we defined as any mention of current public servants or what they're doing, or any mention of political parties per se. I mean, this is civic, but people have a hard time doing that and easily fall into assuming, oh, you're one of those or you're one of those, you're my friend or you're my enemy. We have hardly begun to speak yet.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
We have to come into these conversations with real curiosity.
Let me say something just about the clerkship, because I am running for county clerk again, and I think I'm going to win this time. Last time I ran very deliberately unaffiliated, but there were pros and cons. I was chair at the time and have served as the chair almost, since the month after I moved to this valley in March. I moved here in February of 2020. I went to a county convention in March of 2020, and they made me the chair, and I haven't been able to escape it since until a couple of months ago. I was finally relieved as chair, and someone else is chair now. And I was, isn't that nice? But anyway, I deliberately decided to run unaffiliated, and I did quite well simply by articulating that our entire election statute is a massive confusion and what appears to me to be deliberate corruption over a couple of decades of Democrat and Republican parties trying to get one over on each other for their partisan political advantage. But every major stage of our elections, from determining who may have a ballot, what are the constitutional requirements, and what other statutory requirements do we want to put, to actually giving that person the ballot, to the person casting that ballot, to the canvassing of what does this ballot say, to the counting of how many, and the recording. Every step is utterly pretended by law. It cannot be known between me and you that only those who ought to have been were admitted to the ballot. Only those who should have received one, and only one. That every ballot was cast that was really cast, that every ballot cast was counted as it was really cast, that the county, every step of those, it is impossible by law for me to know and assure you, and you to know and assure me that that was honest. So I think I succeeded because I articulated that well, and I drew 22% of the vote as an unaffiliated. To my research, in the entire state of Utah in 2024, only 2 candidates who ran unaffiliated for any public office drew more than 5% of the vote, and that was 46% in your case for the seat of House District 3, and 22%, less than half, but still considerable in my case for county clerk. So anyway, I think I'll, if I can just continue articulating that, I will win it this time. But I made a deliberate decision this time to run on the Constitution Party ticket. But regardless, then and now, I feel very strongly that if I don't articulate reason, arguments, then I've done at best a great disservice to my fellow citizens.
Yeah. We have to bring our best.
So, and if I do, then maybe I've done a service. And if I win, then it will become my responsibility to administer our abomination of an election law. And this brings us to the parties. One of many flaws. We have like a 743-page monstrosity that's an abomination. But for most of our history, we had an election law of a few pages that was utterly honest and was utterly real at every step, and every citizen of Utah could read it. And the bottom line is you administered it, you regulated and administered it at the precinct level. That's the beginning of real elections. That's 2,500 years of human history, at least in the Western world. That's a ABC. Anyway, but one of the flaws, and it's only one of the flaws, is that in several places our not our Constitution. Our Constitution of Utah is admirable like all the others. It makes no mention of parties. God bless us for that wisdom. God reward us for that wisdom. But God, it seems, has cursed us for the folly of our allowing our elected representatives in our state house to, in recent decades, create this monstrosity that does two wrong things, grossly wrong things. In several places, it presumes to command political parties how to run their affairs. And again, this is quite recent. Commands parties, for instance, that in certain cases they must have a primary for selecting their candidates for office. Their bylaws be damned. Okay, it violates the Constitution of Utah and of the United States. And before I came to the state, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the Constitution Party all sued on that. From what I understand, only the Constitution Party suit that ever reached the merits, and the Constitution Party won because the statute clearly violates the Constitution of Utah and of the United States. But the Republicans, and I guess maybe the Democrats too, never got their filings in on time, and so the judge at a certain point said, "I'm not entertaining your motions anymore. You can all go shoot yourselves or whatever, you know." So you guys, the Republicans never reached the merits, and maybe you guys never reached the merits. You must not have reached the merits either. But the Constitution Party, with no money and no numbers, did and prevailed. So the Constitution Party still runs its own party how it sees fit, according to its bylaws that its members agree on. That's the basic law of every private association, from a church to a fishing club to a ladies' aid association. But the other opposite but equally fatal flaw is that our election statute, again, not our Constitution, our statute privileges political parties, recognizes them as a force and integral to the election process, and privileges them by, on the ballot, listing names next to an R or a D or a C, which perpetuates and worsens, enables, in that sense of a mother and father enabling a child's addiction, you know, enables our lazy, morally lazy, intellectually lazy addiction to parties by, you know, you see Patrick's name, well, I'm not even going to bother. It's too much trouble for me to go to jury duty, so I'm going to evade it. It's too much trouble for me to vote and inform myself of who wants to be the county clerk and who wants to be the county executive and who wants to. So I'm just going to look at this list and I'm going to look for R's, or I'm going to look for D's, or in the case of the handful of us in this country, in this state, who are members of the Constitution Party. There's only about 300 in this entire county, so, you know, we are a small force. I'm going to look for a C. We all, at some level, admit that's really lame. It's really, lazy, it's not just lame, but it is an insult to our fellow citizens. It's an insult to our children. It's an insult to better fathers who gave us a state constitution that has many wonderful merits. Yeah. So that's one thing that when we abandon our entire monstrosity of an election law and create again a real one of the things we need to do is make it absolutely agnostic as to the existence of parties. It's wrong to tell a private association how to run its affairs. It's also wrong to elevate a private association to somehow part of the government, quasi, right. As though, well, you're not a fit candidate for office X, Y, or Z unless you're a member of a recognized or a qualified political party. What the?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. No,
that's really lame. That perpetuates this party disease.
Absolutely. And the groupthink that comes with it.
The groupthink and the group identity thinking, and the laziness of, I don't even want to inform myself about who this man or woman is, or what she or he has said or done. I'm just gonna take the easy. I'm gonna look and assume that if this person shares my same favorite letter, see, or my same favorite animal, donkey or elephant or eagle, and I'm pardoned, Independent American Party, I don't know, do you have an animal emblem? And forgive me for not knowing, you know.
That's a good question.
But, you know, how lame is that? And what a disrespect to ourselves and each other is that?
It gets us away from talking about the issues.
And ideas, as you say, and from recognize each other recognizing ourselves and each other as equally, I'm a citizen of this state and of this country. I may be a lousy one, I may be a great one, or something in between, but I have the same duties and responsibilities that you have, and we owe it to each other to learn more about each other.
That's right. That's right.
And to know each other's thoughts.
That's right.
And each other's character and each other's flaws. And but as citizens, not as donkeys or Republicans or eagles or anything else, right?
As citizens. You know, I get the question quite a bit. Well, who are you going to caucus with, and you know, how are you going to get anything done if you can't caucus?
Yes.
You know, my response to that is, this is a big part of the problem. If we're just going to caucus as parties,
a big part of the problem.
Then, you know, there's all these purity tests on every single issue.
It's a huge part of the problem.
Yeah, if you think any differently
and
from
that's
us,
the reality of
party,
how our state legislature works, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's the reality of how our Congress works.
That's right, and it's hugely problematic. We have complex problems.
Tell me about this. Okay.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture? That's supposed to be the lower house of the upper house.
Oh, yeah.
And you have seats over here, and you have seats over here. What's wrong with that picture? What are they divided by? This is your side, this is my side?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that picture?
Yeah, no, we're all in this together.
This is how we do it in the House and the Senate of the United States, too.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture?
We have to be Americans first.
You know, I told you about this. I just had the blessed opportunity with people from all around this country. This is part of my Constitution Party activity. I'm, as a member of the National Committee, I last week attended our biennial national meeting. So we have a National Committee meeting every spring and every fall. And last fall in Reno, recognizing that this year would be the 5th Jubilee of our country's existence, we recognized, and there was great fervor in the excitement about the prospect. Let's have our spring meeting in Philadelphia. And while we're there, let's go to Independence Hall. And we had a marvelous time. We did our normal meeting things that you do, but we took an entire day to, you know, see the sites that are intimately tied with the birth of our country. Yeah. And to visit Independence Hall. And some of us had the privilege of going into Independence Hall. We had reserved to us 2 hours. The Park Service had reserved for us 2 hours to just 6 or 7 of us. And we went into the signing room where the Declaration was debated and signed, where later the Constitution would be drafted and agreed to and then sent back to Congress to send out to the states for ratification conventions. And in that hall, several of us either recited or read the Declaration of Independence on film, and it's tremendously meaningful to us. But one thing that I remarked on to my compatriots there who were there with us, you could see the chairs, and you know how these park rangers, they're so knowledgeable. Well, our particular park ranger who had given us a tour before, this is not when we were doing the filming, but we were part of a tour of maybe 40 people, and he showed us and explained to us about, you know, what had happened in this hall. He was knowledgeable, as they always are, and he said, well, New Hampshire sat here, Rhode Island sat here, Massachusetts sat here. I'm sorry, let's go north to south. I'm illiterate here. New Hampshire sat here, okay, Massachusetts sat here, Rhode Island sat here, Connecticut sat here, New York sat here. Can you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So Congress seated itself by north to south in a continuous line, okay? North to south. Well, there's a logic to that. We are all equal members of this union. Since 1774, we had kind of coalesced into a union of colonies in similar constitutional distress, you know, and by 1776, we would make ourselves a separate nation. But even in 1774, we recognized we are equals in this. You may be Massachusetts or Virginia, and you may have a huge population and power and everything else, or you may be Delaware or Rhode Island, or, you know, but in one sense, an important sense, you're an equal member of this union. So let's recognize you as such and just seat you north to south, so from New Hampshire to Georgia. And if I'm not mistaken, when we admitted Kentucky, in the then seating arrangement, you know, and then Vermont, you know. This is the way we should have continued our entire country. Whatever the seating arrangement is on the floor of the Senate and the House in Washington ought to be some sort of logic of north to south, the first 13 states, and then the succeeding states in order of their admission in some sort of a logical, continuous serpentine or something. But we ought not to sit by aisles.
Yeah.
This is your side, this is my side, and if we have 2 or 3 who do not belong, well, we'll put them in the middle somewhere and they can caucus with the Democrats or the Republicans. We do ourselves such a great disservice.
Such a disservice.
Don't we?
Such a disservice.
Such a disservice. We do dishonor. We do a great dishonor.
Yeah.
To the million men. A million men. I spent 30 years in the Navy, who wore the uniform of our country before us and died defending the constitutional order that has many excellencies,
Yeah.
one of which is that it doesn't recognize the existence of parties.
Mm-hmm.
We do a great disservice to those dead and good men,
Yeah. Indeed.
and to ourselves.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was in World War II. He was in Africa, and then he went in on D-Day +3 on Utah Beach. And I still have his jacket. I almost wore it today.
Oh, I wish you had.
I
I deliberately wore something patriotic. By the way, it's Memorial Day today. So
It's Memorial Day today. And I've been thinking a lot about him. He actually, the first chapter of this book I'm writing is a lot about him and what I learned from him. And what he did to stand up for this country and the position he put himself in for what he believed in protecting everything that we worked for up to that point in the history of this country.
you know, he probably
And everything
knew
he didn't
so
even
many
know.
people who died.
Oh, so many.
So
At
he
Utah
probably
Beach,
knew so many people.
Yeah.
The first
not a lot
several
of people who
waves.
walked off Utah
The
Beach.
first several waves
Yeah.
didn't even get to their feet on the shore.
Yeah.
So he,
So-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't like to talk about the war.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard for him. He lost so many friends, and he saw some really hard things.
My
But-
adopted father was the same. I'm the first American in my family, but my adopted father Gerald Gillie,
Yeah.
served 20 years in the Army, and he did 2 tours in Vietnam and never talked about it.
Yeah.
And until a few years before he died, he was working on a journal.
Yeah. But he did it. He stepped forward when he was needed to stand
And
up
he
for the
did
things
his-
that he really believed in.
What he saw as his duty to his fellow citizens
That's right.
at the potential cost of his life, at a very likely cost of his
Very
life.
likely.
And at the cost of the lives of many people he probably formed great friendships with.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It is something that is taken far too lightly. It's something that we need to be reflecting deeply on, all of the sacrifices that have been made. And for what?
And
What are
can
we
I
really
be a
trying
little
to
bit
do
of a
here?
more serious citizen?
That's right.
Can
That's
I at
right.
least do that?
That's right.
Can I take this duty more seriously than, well, I'm just going to look for the right letter and just,
Yeah.
you know. But let's talk about legitimate reasons for parties, because if the best Americans who ever lived, and I would argue our first generation towers over every succeeding generation with whatever flaws it had, could coalesce so quickly into parties, there's either an innate human flaw that makes that happen, and I think that's true, but there also might be some legitimate reasons for forming in parties, and if there is, it might be something like, well, it's my duty to persuade my fellow citizens that this is the right way. That in this case that I was referring to before, that Great Britain truly is the greatest threat to our existence, or that France is, or some other great issue. It is a duty for me to persuade, well, and if we view a party as a vehicle designed to coalesce and articulate it, then perhaps we could concede a legitimate reason under that thinking for a party. But if that's legitimate, is it not the truth that we must all confess that for most of our own country's existence, the curse has been much greater than any blessing?
Indeed.
In
Especially
reality.
recently.
Especially in recent years.
I don't, I'm not running unaffiliated because I don't think there's any legitimacy to parties at all. But we have gotten far too hung up on these things have just become echo chambers.
Yes.
And we are not listening to one another. We are not coming to conversations with curiosity. We have very difficult and complex
with
problems
enough
to solve.
respect to at least listen to each other,
That's
right?
That's right.
Well, and again, and I made the decision this time. I am running consciously under the banner of the Constitution Party, and you may think me wrong. I persuade myself that the Constitution Party is not the cancer that the Republican and Democratic parties, and I may be wrong in that. We believe that we articulate very, very faithfully. Listen, we're all in this and together. We agreed to form a government together on the principles of the Declaration and the Constitution. We really mean it, and we mean to persuade the rest of you. But again, even in that, we're open to seeing it as us versus the rest of you.
Yeah.
And blinding ourselves to our own weaknesses, blinding ourselves to each other's virtues without even realizing. When we created this committee last year and this year, Independence 250, we made a deliberate choice. We're going to invite people who identify as being in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
And no party.
And no party. And we made that a deliberate choice. And the core of the committee was a handful of Constitution Party members. But again, our ground rules from the start have been no mention of parties and currently serving public officers or current issues in any of our meetings or in any of the activities that we sponsor.
Yeah.
And I hope those are adequate safeguards against this disease, and that we are creating a force for the reversal of that cancer by the things we're doing this year, the civic devotions, by our challenges to people to memorize the Declaration, by our encouraging people to fast and pray to become better citizens. All of those things, I think, are aptly and deliberately designed to push us in this wholesome direction away from party blindness and to rediscovering ourselves as Americans, as Utahns, and rediscovering each other as Americans and as Utahns.
Indeed, and I very much felt that. I felt welcome and included, and it's not because we all disagree. That's not the point. The point is to come together
on what we do agree on.
And offer dignity to one another, offer respect, listen with curiosity. Absolutely, I really appreciated that.
Well, I hope this is a fruitful conversation.
I think it is. Well, and if I could just back up a little bit, one of the things you just acknowledged was maybe, running under a party wasn't the right thing to do. It's that level of reflection and a healthy amount of self-doubt.
Yeah, it needs to be weighed. And maybe last time I made the wrong decision, and maybe this time I made the wrong decision.
But I'm always trying to do better.
I'm always trying to do the right decision, but I may have been wrong then, and right now I may have been right then and wrong now.
Yeah.
In both cases, I'm making what I think is the right judgment, but I'm not so sure of myself as to say, well, I'm absolutely right.
That's right. It's that reflection and commitment to getting it right, as we move forward, and constantly learning. That's what I really appreciated about you. I think you're a great representative of the Constitution Party. I have learned a tremendous amount from you. I certainly had read the Declaration of Independence before, and I had thought about it.
But you hadn't memorized it, right?
I haven't memorized it, but you have really gotten me to think much more deeply about it.
There's so much
and
there.
There's so much there.
Up until 120 years ago, it was almost expected in any small town in America that the Independence Day observance would be highlighted by some recent 8th grade graduate being asked to recite the Declaration.
Yeah.
And everybody watching and approving and nodding. And here we are this year, our committee, bribing people to memorize the Declaration. Because you say, we think we know it, but until you memorize something, it could be Isaiah 53.
Yeah.
You may, to me, one of the most powerful chapters in all the scriptures. You may think you know what it says. When you commit it to memory, you discover so much more if it's something masterfully put together, such as that is, or such as the Declaration is. Oh, you mean it doesn't say what I always thought it said? I wonder why. And then you discover why it says what it says and why it doesn't, and then you're suddenly understanding your own civic duty better.
Indeed. And I've listened to your recording, your reciting
the one in Independence Hall.
And I've read it and thought about it a lot lately, and I'm still learning new things about it.
Oh yeah.
About what was going on then.
Oh yeah.
And what it means for this moment in time right now.
Right now, it's needed.
Tremendous.
And I've been learning my whole adult life. So I committed the Declaration to Memory in 1987. So I was barely 27 years old. I was driving truck around the country. I was engaged to my first wife. I had always been the most ardently American person that I'd ever met. And so I said, "What's wrong with you, David Gillie? You call yourself an American of extraordinary ardor, and you've never memorized the Declaration? 100 years ago, everybody did.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?" So I was driving truck, and I determined, don't tell anybody. You watch this video. Of course, I'm going to put this on my campaign site, so everybody will know this and know that I am criminally irresponsible. I took one of those little pocket declarations and constitutions, blew up the Declaration, got like 11 pages, laminated them, and carried them with me in the cab of my truck as I drove around the Northwest, from Utah to Washington and everywhere in between, and held this sheaf of laminated pages in my left hand on the steering wheel while I drove many feet and tons behind me of load. This is confession to that I needed to have a ticket, for dangerously endangering traffic.
Yeah.
But of course, when you're young, you think you're immortal.
It's
you think
true.
your reflexes are flawless. Your eye zooms in and out like in an instant. And so I was driving along and peeking down and memorizing, winning the course,
Yeah.
But anyway, my point was, so now you all know that I'm a criminally irresponsible person, and don't vote for me for county clerk, because by God, when I was 27, I was endangering my fellow.
You've learned since then.
Yeah, hopefully I've learned since then. I look at horror of that now, But by memorizing it then, I can testify from experience. It has taught me for some 40 years now.
Yeah.
Almost 40 years. By memorizing anything like that and sampling it in your mind, in the back pocket of your mind, in your idle moments, you learn layers and layers of things that you never knew that were there to learn.
Yeah.
And that's why for thousands of years in Western civilization you memorize thousands of lines of Caesar or Ovid or Aeschylus or whatever, or Shakespeare, because that would nourish you. Right?
Yeah.
Well, the Declaration will nourish you, and I memorized the Constitution and all the amendments in 1999, I guess it was, and that's nourished me in the 26 years from then. Because even more so, everything you ever read or hear on American civics with regard to the Constitution, I will guarantee you 99% of the time is utterly wrong. But you won't know it because you'll hear it and accept it, unless you have in your mind the actual words stuck there, fixed in front of your eyes of your mind. You say, "No, there is no such thing. It doesn't say that. It says this." So that's the reason for memorizing. But people need to begin by memorizing the Declaration, because that's where we've done two things unanimously in our country's history: adopted independence and adopted our current Constitution.
Yeah.
Nothing else have we done unanimously. That's the bedrock, the only bedrock on which you and I can re-become fellow citizens and friends. We can seek for a bedrock in sports teams or anything, any other kind of effluvium that will not hold.
Yeah.
That will not hold.
Yeah, but it's no small feat to memorize it. I mean, it's over 1,300
But
words.
it's really not hard. Once you start, you'll find, because it's so masterfully designed, you'll be amazed at how much less difficult it is than you suspect. It's 1,300 words. I think it's 1,338 or something like that. Constitution is, with all the amendments, is like 7,000, and it's less easy because it's more nuts and bolts and less fluid. But nevertheless, it's much easier than you think, because it's so masterfully organized. There's not so much as a preposition chosen accidentally.
Well, and that's one of the most remarkable things about it for me. Jefferson wrote a large portion of it, but this was something that was written by a group of people who thought differently.
How does committee editing leave a product that is not garbage? Right. Because anything else that's done by committee, anything else that's done by committee is inherently incoherent. It doesn't cohere.
I think there's a really important lesson there. What are we missing today that we cannot come together and bring different ideas together and produce something?
They must have listened to each other. They were all much better educated. The cobbler, Roger Sherman, was much more literate than I am. Okay? And that's one thing. So we are many orders of magnitude less literate today than we were. We're flooded with information, but we're illiterate. When we read the first paragraph of the Declaration, I forget how many words it is, and the second paragraph of the Declaration, which together make up 2 sentences, together those make up, I think, 18% of the whole document. Okay, and your kids today, if they know anything about composition from high school, said, run-on sentence. That's the first thing. But neither is a run-on sentence. There's no discontinuity. What you have are nests, nested within nests, nested within nests of clauses, and the whole thing is masterfully ordered. And so it's because of that, it's very easy to memorize. But imagine that survived, and imagine the Constitution survived all the committee of a hot summer in Philadelphia of the Constitutional Convention. They must have, one, been much more literate, but two, what you keep alluding to, they must have realized the necessity of listening to each other and cohering, coalescing, in crystallizing in something that is coherent and coheres with the rest.
And offering the dignity that you have something to contribute, even if it's a little bit different from the way I think about it.
Now Jefferson, I know, was terribly pained, even by the edits that Franklin and Adams made in the Committee of Five, and was more pained by the editing that went on the floor of the Committee of the Whole. And he was especially not pained, but in despair that his single longest articulated charge, you look at the architecture of the whole thing, Jefferson begins with more general and less acute charges against King, and then later King in Parliament, and then King, and moves up to more specific and more damning charges. So there's a rhetorical crescendo in the whole thing. He also moves from legislative problems to judicial problems to executive problems, okay. But he built, mind you, he built that structure to crescendo rhetorically, with the final charge being more than twice as many words as what he spent on any other single charge, charging the king with using his veto power corruptly to stymie and defeat every colonial legislature's attempt to stop the slave trade. South Carolina said, we will not sign unless you strike that. And they eventually struck that. So he was more than pained. He was agonized over that. But anyway, you make the point that nevertheless, as a committee, they created a whole that coheres, that goes from A to B to C in the most remarkably coherent way, as does the Constitution. That shows some qualities, some civic qualities that we need to learn, huh?
Exactly.
Because usually anything done in committee looks as though it was done in committee. I mean, can you imagine writing the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven in committee?
Right.
Ain't gonna happen. Okay?
It only happens in cases where people are really coming together.
There must be a miraculous coming together of minds and souls and desires.
And commitment.
And commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh.
And we have really lost that.
Oh, yes.
And it's ours to reclaim.
And this is what our committee means by civic repentance. We have so much to do to become worthy Americans, worthy of that name.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put this on my clerk campaign website, and I hope you put this on your House District 3 campaign website. We'll have to look at it and see what stupid things we may have said and edited. I don't know.
I feel like we did all right.
All righty.
Thanks so much, David. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you so much.
Yeah.
I think it'd be great. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah.
I think I may be late for the memorial.
Oh yeah.
What time do you have a watch?
It's 9:48. Yeah.